I'm JP.
Tiff.
That's Tiff.
I'm Manny.
It's Cross Colors. Back again. Today's topic is a good cry. We just been warming up, having this conversation like before we got started, because some conversations are easier to have than others. But this one is actually going pretty good. So we were talking about when was the last time that we actually have had a good cry, and like the reasons for it, and then we'll address some other things that are kind of tied into that. Who want to go first? You want to go first?
Manny.
Manny. Yeah, Manny was going.
As far as a good cry, or we just talking about it in general, I don't know if you was recording. There was a situation. My father had passed June the 5th of last year, and I was good in the funeral. Everything was cool. A lot of people was devastated, but me and him really didn't have a relationship like that. I mean, I knew who he was, and he tried to make amends on his way out, and I was able to let him meet his grandson. So he did that before he passed. But he kind of was a stranger to me, so it didn't affect me as much as it did like a lot of other people. But after the funeral, he had a favorite aunt that approached me and was just like, man, I live close to you. There's no reason. I don't know who you are. I don't know nothing about you. I don't know your personality. You know what I'm saying? And your father was like my favorite person in the world. And she was just distraught. Like her world was shattered. And as she was talking to me, I started crying because she was so emotionally wrecked that it was making me feel bad for her. Not for my father or not, for the funeral and feeling sorry for everybody and all that, but because I could tell the genuine love that she had. So many people had talked about her in their relationship before I met her before, but like this was something different. So, but I'm gonna get back to a good cry. That was just like a recent, like authentic cry. Okay.
Cool.
Why do I have to go now?
Okay.
No, I'll go.
Okay.
So, the last time I had a good cry was when my nephew went off to the Navy, like around our birthdays. His is April 10th, mine is April 19th, and he has to go to, he traveled to Japan. And right before he left, the message that he sent me was just very powerful. I felt every word that he meant. So, and I was at work, and I just went to the bathroom and just sobbed my life away. But they were happy tears. I was happy for him. I was happy that he's not giving up and he's just pursuing his dream, and that was really like inspiring to me at that moment. So I just cried happy tears at work as if I lost my best friend or something. Like I was boo-hooing. But it felt great. It felt great. Then I got my life together and went back to work like nothing happened.
Like a G, like nothing happened.
Yes.
Man, the last time I had a good cry, actually I was here. It was during Jemiah Calvin's show. I was talking to Corky. Shout out to Corky. We were talking right in the front, and we were just looking around, and we were watching Jemiah like enjoy himself, like at his show. This is like his first solo show. It was like our first solo show. And I remember talking to his mom, and she was taking a picture. It was like, Jemiah's kids, so it was like, I forget how many, it might have been like 6 or 7 of her grandkids, like all right here, like right here in this space, And she was like, man, it's just like really good to see, like my like I got grandchildren like in here, like my son is in here, we got a bunch of family. So I was thinking about all of that, and then just like feeling the vibe like in the room was like, damn, man, we did that. Like, this shit feels good, And it was like, man, and it was kind of like overwhelming, to a point. And, but that shit felt great though, And what I did, I had to go stand outside, It was like, it was a happy moment, And sometimes it's just like too much to stay in your head, like the feelings end up coming out of your eyes,
Yes.
And that's exactly what it was, And I stood outside, and even standing outside, it was cold that night too, and even standing outside, man, it was just like, it wasn't that cold, but it was just like standing out there was like, man, I needed just like some cool air on me, so I can just like come back down, and it was so hard to come back down, you know, because just like that emotion, it was just like such a good one, you know. But yeah, I was like all the way up, and I think like the other time like before that where I had like a really good cry was it was when my dad had died, and it wasn't, you know, like right after he died, you know, I took care of everything, just did like everything like how I needed to. But I was sitting in a house, you know, and I was sitting on the floor. I was writing something, and it was a song that had came on. It's called "Please Come Home" by Gary Clark Jr. It was a song that I was listening to like when I found out that my dad had died. So I was on the way over, you know, to like identify the body when I meet up at the corner. And you know, like my dogs, I had 2 pits. They're awesome dogs, and they could kind of just like feel this vibe, you know, and. Benny, you know, he just walked over there, you know, and he just kind of like laid his head like right here on my leg, you know, and then Sonny walked over, you know, and he kind of just like curled up like the same way, you know, and just like laid there, you know, and I cried. I was like, man, like, yo, y'all get me, and I didn't even have to say anything, you know. It was just like I said, it was just like so much like attached like to that song and like all these moments, you know, in time, and it was just like, man, yo, but I really needed that, you know, cause like I hadn't. Like I said, I went back to work, you know, like I felt my dad died. It was like on a Sunday, you know, and I went right back to work, you know. And it was just like, all right, cool, you know, to just continue to deal with life, you know, and like not deal with it, you know. It was just like so much. So like when it finally did get to that point, you know, it was just like, all right, cool, we got that shit out, you know, and it was so necessary. Excuse me, which kind of, when I was thinking about it, you know, like coming up with the topic for this talk, when you know how good like a cry will make you feel, you know, just like getting it out and dealing with it, you know, it's kind of tripped out that like the perception is that men that cry are weak, or boys that cry that there's something wrong, you know. It's just like, hey man, toughen up. Like I said, it's different, you know, like, hey man, nobody just operates in a space where they just cry only, you know. It's like, hey, somebody yells at you, you cry. You know, somebody points at you, you cry. Somebody says something about you, you cry. Like, nobody operates in that kind of space, right? But when you're just, you know, just like displaying this human emotion, right? That, like, crying is not something that like only women do, you know, or like that only men do. That's a human emotion, you know. So it's funny that like that's the perception, you know, that exists like in society, you know. I think it has a lot to do with this the toxic masculinity. That like, yo, they're tough, and the real trip about that is, right, when you see guys like they lose their guy, and it's just like, man, like I love bro, like they'll never say anything like that at all until like one of the guys ends up dead, right, and it's like, man, I love bro, now I'm crying, and it's like, yo, but you're tough guys, like tough guys don't cry, right? You know, it's just like, man, so it's to me, I think it's really interesting that that's still like the perception, you know, that exists. I don't, other than, you know, like talking about it, like how we're doing now, you know, as far as like addressing it, you know, and actually seeing it as a problem, because it is, right? Because that keeps people from actually being themselves, right? Like being your true self. And actually it keeps them from coping or dealing with, you know, different things. Like I said, it keeps you from being like human, I feel. Like you said, I forget what the movie was, because I'm segueing to your funny story about like the cry. But like you said, like sometimes like in doing so, like in not displaying that emotion, it actually makes you like less of a human. You know. But go ahead with your story, cause I know it was good.
Oh man. No, I was saying, yo, if you watch Set It Off and you haven't cried when Cleo died at the end when she was getting shot at the 6-4, you are a robot. I watched that. I don't care how tough you is. I don't care if you tatted up 340 solid muscle. You're going to cry. Because Cleo was the homie. And she went out. She hit the switch. She bucking. I'm in this bitch. She hopped out, about to give it to him. They killed her. And the cry continued with Jada Pinkett watching Frankie die. You know what I'm saying? And then the detective see Jada. And Jada like, motherfucker, I'm going to Mexico. Like, that whole ending was just... I cried. I don't care. I cried. But piggybacking off what he said, I mean, even for me and my experience growing up, Pops wasn't there. I had a whole bunch of like neighborhood cats and uncles and whatever, but I was with my mom and my grandmother, and like crying was a coping mechanism for certain stuff as a shorty, and like you get told that you soft or you a mama's boy and all that, and that kind of messes with you, and you bottle it up and become this unnecessary ass tough strong person. I really credit having my younger brother. My brother's like 7.5 years younger than me. And when he came along, he started getting older and seeing I got an older brother. I had to toughen up and be this unnecessary ass tough guy. And to show him like, man, to kind of teach him how to be a man in certain ways that I had to kind of take bits and pieces from, you know what I'm saying? And it was the same way from him. You know, he would cry about certain things or certain things would bother him. I'd be like, man, cut that shit out or toughen it up or whatever, not knowing that going too hard can force you to bottle it up and now you another unnecessary ass tough person in the world. So I really think that for young men, men growing up, whoever's in their life, if the pops ain't there, if it's just mom or whatever it may be, you know, let that door open. Like, not let them be no crybaby, you know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, sometimes expressing that and crying is the best thing. It was serious situations I went through when I cried, and my mom